Welcome to Harnessing Your Wealth with Billy Peterson. As the founder and CEO of Peterson Wealth Services and a former #1 ranked jockey, Billy knows what it takes to succeed. In this podcast, Billy and his team will help equine enthusiasts, business owners, and retirees understand the keys to financial freedom. Saddle up and get ready for a ride you won't soon forget on how you can harness your wealth.
Hello there, everyone, and thanks for joining us again today for Harnessing Your Wealth. Today, we have a great show scheduled, and of course, Shaun Peterson is on with us as usual, and our guest speaker is Dr. Vince Baker. Vince is a longtime friend of ours and been a client of mine for many years, and I met Vince, I think it was clear back in 1996. He was still a jockey at the time, and Vince has been on the racetrack before Moses was born, I think. But he's been around a long time, and he was he's always been a good vet, but he kind of took up a little bit of an interest in what I was doing with my career in retiring from the racetrack and moving into investment management. I invited him to one of my seminars that I was holding. This was back at Los Alamitos race course, and Vince, being a good sport, he attended the seminar. I was talking a lot about different investment strategies and retirement planning, and I had a couple of giveaways, and one of the giveaways, I think, was a watch. It was a really expensive watch, and somehow Vince wins the watch, and I think that's kind of what helped him decide to be a client of mine after that. So it was fun having Vince attend the event. He always tells people, Billy fell off a horse, hit his head pretty hard, and when he woke up, he thought he was a financial advisor. And so, I guess that's my claim to fame with him, is how I got into this business. But Vince, we're here to talk about you and your career. Enough about me. Why don't you share with our listeners just how you got into the business of veterinarian industry and how you became a vet? Go back and give us a kind of a chronological of your history.
So I was very fortunate. I was the son of a equine veterinarian. My father was one of the first in the state of California to work strictly on horses. So I was born on a horse farm where his first equine hospital was in Southern California. And as a kid, my brothers and sisters and we would ride with my father as an ambulatory vet, and got to go to people's ranches like the Irvines, like Vicente Yorba from Yorba Linda, the Spanish land grant, Dick O'Neill, the Ortega Highway, Ronald Reagan up in Santa Barbara area, the Elmores in San Clemente. So some of the big names in real estate or land grants, he took care of their horses, and I saw through his work ethics how important he was to the industry and as a veterinarian to protect horses. And so spending years and years and years with him, I knew that my college career would be in veterinary medicine, and my professional career would be in equine medicine. So that started, I graduated from veterinary school in 89 and started practicing equine veterinary medicine at the racetrack at Los Alamitos. And then at nights, I did ranch work to some of the trainers that owned horse farms or owners, etc. So I put in my time and many hours, and look forward to doing it every day.
Now, Vince, you started out, as you mentioned, at Los Alamitos, so working primarily, for the listeners who aren't familiar with the terminology of the racetracks, Los Alamitos is primarily a quarter horse track.
Correct.
Or it was back in those days, at least, right?
Yes, I mean, and quarter horses, obviously, by their name and definition, they would run anywhere from 220 yards to up to a quarter of a mile, 440 yards. So it was from a starting gate to 40 miles an hour in less than a couple seconds.
Yeah. And when you were working I guess Los Alamitos is primarily night racing, correct? So it was a lot different
Yeah. So
day.
yeah, no, we would work, and most of the time get caught up around lunchtime, around noon or 1, and then obviously the treatments for racing, being the post time, starting of the first race was at 7:30 in the evening. Lasix, which is a diuretic to help horses prevent exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage, would be given to the horses 4 hours prior to the race. So, usually in the middle of the day, I had a couple hours off, if you will, to do either work at the hospital or do, some outside work.
How did you get started in the thoroughbred industry? Because quarter horses obviously are a totally different breed.
Yeah, they're all horsemen. It's just a different breed. And so some of the trainers in the early 90s would make the switch. They could see that the future of quarter horse racing in Southern California was not as bright as the thoroughbred industry in California or the United States. And by that, I mean, quarter horse racing is still popular in California, but the states like Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma are much stronger now than they were back then. So quarter horse racing was on the decline, but just not as influential in California as the thoroughbred. So some of the trainers started to make a change and would get their clients to purchase thoroughbred race horses at Santa Anita, and from Los Alamitos to Santa Anita in those days was, it still is only 21, 22 miles, but it would only take me 30, 40 minutes to drive up there and look at the horses that the previous quarter horse trainers, now thoroughbred trainers, had, and they wanted me to look at them.
Now, a couple of those guys are pretty well known. If you want to, will you mind sharing some of the names that you work with?
Yeah, no, I mean, some of the first ones were Bruce Jackson, Cesar Dominguez. Obviously, Wayne Lucas was a quarter horse trainer, and then in the middle 80s moved to thoroughbreds. And I was fortunate enough to get a phone call from him one day and, asked me if I would make the change completely, I could have his work. And in those days, it meant Santa Anita Racetrack, Hollywood Park Racetrack in Los Angeles. And then he also had a stable in Kentucky at Churchill Downs, and usually one in New York, Belmont Racetrack. So, talking with my father, he suggested, because of the future of horse racing and the future of quarter horse racing versus thoroughbred, it would be advantageous for me to make that change. So in 1990, 91 is when I made the switch. And it was, I think, the summer of 91. So every morning I'd get up and drive to Del Mar, which is in San Diego, do my work there, and then drive from San Diego back to Arcadia to Pasadena at Santa Anita Racetrack, because Wayne Lucas had a stable there also. So I put a few miles on every day just to keep the profession honest, if you will.
Take care of his horses. I bet high demand. That guy is very meticulous. Wayne Lucas is.
Yeah, he was. When he had his barn at Los Alamitos, it was very pristine, clean. Everything was done by the book. The horses were, fed at 3 a.m. in the morning. Then they'd train, and they were fed directly after that, and, bathed and, fresh water 3-4 times a day. Very meticulous. His barn was beautified. And he was a strict horseman.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I came out to to Santa Anita, I moved from my tack from New Mexico, and I wanted to give it a shot to break into the riders colony out at Santa Anita and Hollywood Park and those. And of course, some of the best riders in the world, as you know, when you're going up against Eddie De La Houssaye, Chris McCarron, Lafitte Pinkai, Corey Nakatani, Kent Disso. I mean, yes, I could
Yeah.
go on and on and on. Some of the great riders.
They're premier jockeys and some of the premier horses in the world.
Right. Very difficult. And I remember going out and talking to Wayne one of the first mornings I was out at the racetrack. And he says, hey, I'm always willing to give a young guy who's working hard a chance. All I'm asking you to do is come out there and earn it. So I said, yeah, anything you want me to do, I'll be willing to do it. So he said, all right, be here every morning at 5 a.m. So, as the rest of the jockeys are sleeping till around 8, I was out at his barn at 5 a.m. And half the time he would say, no, we don't have anything for you today, Billy.
Yeah.
And so I'd walk off and wait there 2-3 hours before the other trainers showed up. But occasionally he'd have a horse for me to work, and I'd get on the horse and go out the track, and he ponied everything. Of course, he'd go to the track with everything. And he was the only trainer I ever worked horses for that was critical of every movement, every detail about what you were doing with the horse during the work.
Still to this day, at age 87, he gets on that pony and goes out with the first set every day.
He's a worker. It's amazing. I mean, people that want to get into this business should follow him around for a while to see what it takes to be successful. But he's one of the most successful trainers, obviously, of all time.
Right.
So, Vince, what does a typical day for you look like today, now that you're very established and you work on some of the best horses in the world?
Well, I still, I made a rule, or I suggested a rule to the California Horse Racing Board years ago that the track in the morning could not be opened for training unless there was a veterinarian on the ground, just in case something happened, or, horse got loose and got injured or something like that. And they thought that was a great idea and said, Vince, you start this. So Vince still gets to the track at 4:30 in the morning. Now I only work 5 days a week, 5 or 6 days a week, but I still get there, and I pass that on to all the practices that, and young veterinarians there at the track, that it's very important that if you're going to take a day off, one of your associates or one of your other practicing veterinarians on the racetrack understand that, it's very important for us to be there for the safety of these horses. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm up at 3 every morning. I get to the racetrack by 4:30, and you make your rounds if anybody needs anything for their horses. If their horses have a fever, that's another thing veterinarians have imposed, if you will, on trainers, that all of their grooms take their horses' temperatures, and potentially a groom will take care of 4 to 5 race horses, and that they get to know those horses inside and out. And they'll have the temperature taken and recorded on a card outside the stall before, the veterinarians reach the barns. And then, there's typically 3 breaks at Santa Anita, meaning they'll shut the racetrack down, renovate it, and open it up in 30 minutes for workers. And so, the first break is at 6:30, then the next one's at 7:45, and then the following one is at 9 o'clock, and the track usually closes at 10. So it's open from about 4:45 until 10 every day. So you make the rounds. If you need to look at horses that are not quite right, you auscultate their lungs, pull bloods to send to our lab, which we fortunately have a very good lab at Santa Anita. And I can get results in an hour and a half, as to, do they have a bacterial infection? Do they have a viral infection? I can do cultures to see what type of virus it is, treat them with anti-inflammatories, and proceed as, the blood work and the lab work would dictate. Then you also treat a lot of horses that would be breezing or working out. And typically, if a horse is going to work a hard half mile or a hard 5/8 mile, they would get anywhere from 150 to 250 milligrams of Lasix, which is a diuretic, to help lower their blood pressures and to prevent bleeding from the lungs. It's a phenomenon that we don't even realize that humans, the marathon runners, oftentimes will bleed a bit in their lungs, the caudal dorsal lung lobes, because of the pressures. And if a human being, his respiration, is typically, or his heart rate, I'm sorry, is typically 60 to 80. They may go out for a run and it's going to go to 120, 140 beats per minute. Where a horse, their standing heart rate is 30 to 36. And when they go out and breeze or do a workout, it goes well over 200, 220. Sometimes you can't even count it. It's so high. So the pressures that take place in the blood oxygen exchange in the lungs is incredible in the horse. And also the horse is the only species where it's called rouleau formation. The red blood cells have a tendency to stick in low pressure systems, meaning in the lungs where gas exchange take place. So that's, one thing that a horse has different than a human, but humans can have pulmonary hemorrhage, and marathon runners will. So we do a lot of that work, Lasixes, and maybe horses that have walked for a few days might need a sedation so they don't go out there and get over rambunctious and run off and dump the rider or hurt themselves. So, there's a lot of that. And then horses that you have on antibiotics, that are, twice a day or 3 times a day, you'll start those. And then, as the morning progresses, other things come up. You look at horses that have maybe hit themselves, have a small laceration or a small bump, or have a warm joint, so you x-ray, have soft tissue injury, so we'll ultrasound. So it varies from diagnostic imaging to internal medicine to just minor things, jogging a horse up and down on the road to make sure that they're sound and their legs are in good shape.
Right.
Billy, I want to make sure you heard that about marathon runners, because I know you're a big runner.
Yeah, I think that's what happened to you, Shaun, in the marathon that you were trying to run. You must have bled.
And... I was a runner myself. I ran cross country and track, and I was still a runner up until about 6 or 7 years ago. And I lived out in Somas, which is surrounded by thousands of acres of orchards. Mostly avocados, and it was great. I'd run to the top of the hill. I'd see the ocean. And one day running downhill, you don't put as much confidence, if you will, coming down the hill, because you're just kind of gliding down. And I jammed my knee, and my right knee blew up, and there was fluid on it, and it was sore. So I thought, well, I'm going to treat this conservatively, ice it, and maybe take some, Advil or Tylenol for a few days. And I did that. And after about a month, it didn't come down. So I went to an orthopedic guy, and he did an MRI, and he said, well, you've stretched your ACL a little bit, and your medial collateral is stretched. And he said, listen, you're 50 years old. What the heck are you running for? That is the worst exercise on your knees and ankles. And he said, pick up bike riding. And so my wife bought me a Peloton, and that's what I do now.
There you go. You've got me terrified, Vince, because when I go for a run, I think my heart rate, and I'm not kidding, is around 175, 180. So
well,
maybe I better start walking.
Get off the couch and do it a little more often.
No kidding.
The problem Shaun has is he's trying to burn off the beers from the night before, and it takes quite a while.
All good Mormons will do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Oh my.
Excuse me, we're almost in the home stretch for the episode. But before we cross the finish line, I just want you to know that you can contact Billy and his team at www.petersonws.com or by visiting the show notes. Now, back to harnessing your wealth.
Hey, Vince, what are some of the most notable horses that you've ever worked on?
Wow. When you asked me if I'd, intervene with you and converse with you on this podcast, I thought, gosh, I got to stop and think about this. And so I for the heck of it, I looked up the horses that I was part of, their careers, The first Kentucky Derby winner I worked on was Thunder Gulch. Wayne Lucas, Michael Tabor owned it. And that was in 94. So I kind of went down through it, and I've been part of, worked on, been a part of their lives of 13 Kentucky Derby winners, 12 Preakness winners, and 13 Belmont winners. So as part of the Triple Crown, I've been fortunate enough to work on a group, pretty good number of winners. And for me, 2 Triple Crown winners. I worked on American Pharoah, and he won the Triple Crown and was the first horse to win the Triple Crown in 34 years. So there's a lot of stories too that go behind those, and know that you were part of it. Say American Pharoah, he was, as a 2-year-old, he was favorite to win the Breeders' Cup 2-year-old race, which is the boys going a distance, around 2 turns, meaning a mile and a 16th. And they, the winner of that usually instantaneously becomes the favorite for the Triple Crown, or the first race, the Kentucky Derby. So American Pharoah, his last workout before the Breeders' Cup, he came back sore. And the trainer was Bob Baffert. And so obviously I looked at it, and there was nothing obvious, no swollen joints, no heat, no, exaggerated soft tissue. So I started to do what we call nerve blocks. So you block a nerve proximal to the area intended to block. So first I blocked out the foot, and there was no change. Then I blocked out the ankle down, there was no change. And then I did a lateral pulmonar nerve block, which is specific for the high suspensory on a horse, and the horse went sound. So I knew the location, but I didn't know what was wrong because there was no heat or swelling. So I ultrasounded it, and at the suspensory ligament is attaches or starts just below the knee on the back of the cannon bone, goes down to the proximal sesamoids, attaches there, and then goes distally and attaches in the pastern. And it is known as the stay apparatus, if you will, of the fetlock. So I ultrasounded the high suspensory, and at the attachment site, there was only a 30% enlargement, no torn or ruptured fibers. So it seemed to me that it was not enough to cause this class of lameness that we were witnessing. So I knew that if we stopped now, the horse would have a career. And so I told the trainer and the owner, and I said, look, I can get the horse sound by, giving it some anti-inflammatories and maybe even injecting some corticosteroids there, but I cannot promise you that it'll have a future. And so I pushed and prodded, and didn't take much to convince them. Well, look, we'll skip the Breeders' Cup, which is a big race. It's a grade 1, and it's worth $1.5 million to the winner. So we walked the horse for 60 days. I did some follow-up imaging with the ultrasound and a limited nuke scan, and everything looked good, and the horse went back into training, and sure enough, he went on to win the Triple Crown. So you feel like I wasn't the horse, I wasn't the trainer, I wasn't the jockey, but I put in my 2 cents and my interest and my knowledge, and used the facilities that were available to me, and the professionals around me, and then we got that horse to where he never had an issue again in his life.
That's awesome.
Those kind of things, I don't take credit for that horse winning the Triple Crown, but I was part of that team, and that kind of makes you feel good. And that's what I think drives all of us. No, but like for you, I'm sure, like when the stock market was raging, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and you were, we'd speak from time to time. I would not acknowledge all the paperwork that you send to me, but we'd speak from time to time, and you'd give me an update as, hey, you're doing great. And that's got to make you feel good. That's what you're there for. And I have a reason to be on this earth too. And I feel like it's to protect these horses, to give them, a career. It's not win a race. It's give this individual or all these horses a career. And that's what life, life to me is about.
Yeah, that's good. We were out at the AQHA convention over the weekend, Vince, and listened to a lot of the challenges, rules and regulations that are going on in the industry. But what would you say are some of the main challenges that are facing your profession out there in the vet world?
It's a tragedy actually right now. I was not aware of how hard the veterinary profession, both small animal and equine, small animal, you will see every day I get at least one or two emails from either the American Veterinary Medical Association or the California, or some of these institutions, even from the University of California, Davis, promoting veterinary medicine and sending out emails where you can get mental health, strategies sent to you. And I thought, God, why? I mean, and apparently the veterinary profession has been hit. The small animal profession has been hit so hard by these large corporate buyouts. So I'm not going to name any names, but they're large corporations that are purchasing, a clinic that's owned by one or two people. And that maybe there's only 2 or 3 veterinarians working there, or maybe there's 50, but they buy them out. They promise them either stock or a buyout after 5 years. But they set up limitations. You have to see a new patient every 15 minutes. You cannot use this procedure or that procedure. You have to follow our guidelines. And I've spoke to many small animal veterinarians that have quit or leaving the profession because of the stresses. I mean, obviously, if you're a human doctor or a veterinarian, it's all about the patient, and you do what you have to do. And as my father told me, before I was even a veterinarian, and then after I was, he said, Vince, you're not going to know everything. And now it is so specialized. It's an impossibility. But he told me, know somebody that is proficient in every field, whether it's internal medicine, whether it's diagnostic imaging, whether it's surgery, so get to know. So if you think there's a problem here, that your diagnostics are 100% sure, get a referral. And you're not allowed to do that apparently in a lot of these big corporate owned clinics. And it's just ruining these poor people that have put their heart and soul into, small animals or that. And, in the equine profession, it's the hours, even now, I would say I probably put in 60 to 70 hours a week, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm 64 years old. And back in my heyday, I worked 7 days a week for the first 20 some years. And, after I'd leave the racetrack at 5 PM, I'd go to ranches owned by Blaine Swanervelt, Lakeview Thoroughbred Farm, Jen's List Farm. I'd do that work at night, and I wouldn't get home till midnight 1 and right back at it again the next day. So the hours in large animal and these new rules and regulations in racing are killing large animal veterinarians or equine veterinarians, and these corporate buyouts are destroying small animal medicine. And I think it's the individuals feel like they can't do their job anymore, and they're taking it personally, and the mental fatigue that is thrown on people. We can all go out there for a run, and when you're tired, but mental fatigue is so much more found on these veterinarians nowadays, that the profession is hurting. And I've spoken, I have an internship program, and I set it up with the American Association of Equine Practitioners, which is the largest group of veterinarians that work strictly on horses. And I said, I get first pick because I pay the best in the United States for an intern. And granted, Southern California is not a cheap place to live, but I pay them enough to where they can, rent a house, have a great job, get paid, save money, etc. And I lost my intern because of a circumstance that is occurring in a political situation in the state of California. And so I called back to the AAP, said, I need another intern. And the president told me, Vince, I've got over 300 applications on my desk for equine vets. And last year, University of California at Davis, the veterinary school, only had one individual interested in doing veterinary medicine, more specifically equine. So
Wow.
it's tough.
Sorry for the interruption, everyone. Just wanted to make a quick announcement that we will be holding our annual financial literacy boot camp on March 21st from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. right here at Weber State University. So if you live close by and you'd like to attend or send your son or daughter, niece or nephew, reach out to us. We can give you the details. You need to RSVP right away. Now let's get back to the show. And some of the challenges that I hear around the conferences that I attend, and even speaking to other veterinarian who are clients or horse trainers who are clients, even owners, are, regulations that are coming down from obviously different governmental agencies that want to obviously avoid or eliminate unsoundness issues with horses, and of course the catastrophic loss. But
yeah, I understand.
Sometimes those are the people that don't know what they're talking about. Of course, they're the ones writing the rules.
Right. Obviously, but maybe some of your listeners don't realize I see my patients every single day, whether they're, temperatures are normal, they're eating well, their digestive tract is well, they're training well. I see them every single day. So I know my clients' horses. I know them very well. And I mean, I can go into a stall with a horse and look at them in the eye and go, this doesn't look right. They don't have that bright, glistening eyeball that I'm used to, or that comes with an individual that is healthy. But most of the people in these regulatory political positions in the states, they're not sure which end of a horse eats hay. So no, in all sincerity. And so,
yeah.
They don't understand that there's not more people on this planet that love animals more than veterinarians, and we're here for them. And we, I tell people, it's kind of sad, but I'll admit to it now that, where was I when my wife went into labor? I was at Del Mar and ultrasounded the horse and then drove up and met her at the hospital. Where was I the day my father passed away? Where was I the day my mother passed away? Where was I the day my older brother passed away? I was at the racetrack working. It's and those kind of things people don't understand that are in political positions. Politics does not have a role in veterinary medicine. We as doctors do.
Right. And I think you would concur that horses are some of the most pampered individuals on the planet. I always make the joke, hey, if I'm going to die and come back as something else, just make me a thoroughbred stallion. Okay, good one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you wouldn't be very good at that.
Come on, Vince. Come on, Vince. I'd be right up there.
I completely concur. It's and unfortunately, it's like, I don't understand what you do every day. And I always give you heck about, did you fall asleep on the couch or anything? Like, when your girls answer the phone, they say, oh, Billy's in a meeting. I said, you mean he's out watching his kids play, baseball, and, I don't know, and I don't pretend to know your schedule and your business, but your success is obviously due to your responsible lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes in every aspect, every career, every industry. The people that you see that are successful, by and large, for the most part, and there are exceptions, but most of them that stay successful have earned it, and they had to put in the hours to get there.
Exactly. No, exactly.
And so I that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Vince, is just knowing how well respected you are. I mean, not only in the tracks that you serve and the people that you've worked for, horses you worked on, I mean, seriously, all over the world. I know you've traveled to England, and I mean, you've probably worked on horses for sheiks and very high profile people.
Been to Dubai, been to Saudi Arabia, been to South America, been to England, France. I've been very fortunate.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think you've been so successful? I mean, other than the hard work, is it, I mean, have you been able to parlay these relationships and of course doing the right thing, or do you have anything that you just...
That's the key. I mean, what my father told me is, I think the key to my success, be a hard worker, be concerned, and circle yourself with the pros in all aspects, So, Wayne McElraith, the head of surgery and the father of arthroscopic surgery, just retired from, sent out an email last week to me that he was going to retire. But for 44 or 45 years, he's come to my dad's hospital and then my hospital at least twice a month or 2 weekends a month for 44 years. And that's the father of arthroscopic surgery. Every book on arthroscopic surgery is written by him. Courses given throughout the United States, throughout the world by him. People that are involved in MRIs. I have 3 different groups. If it's a fetlock, I send it to a radiologist in Florida. If it's a foot, I send it to a radiologist in England. And if it's anything else, I send it. There's an imaging department at University of California, Davis. So, don't be ignorant. And engross yourself in who's the best in the industry, and make it your policy to get them to concur with your potential diagnosis and maybe what's the next step forward. Or an internal medicine specialist, if you have a sick animal that just isn't responding to the normal treatments. Trainers, like the first time I brought an internal medicine specialist into his barn, people thought, Vince, what are you doing? You're acknowledging to Wayne Lucas that you don't know what's going on. And I didn't take it that way. I took it as, I'm bringing in a specialist because I care about that animal more than anybody else. And Wayne Lucas thanked me the next day. He said, Vince, that was impressive, and I want to thank you for caring that much and knowing that person. So that's true in every walk of life.
Yep. And you got to have a good team around you for sure.
I think my father instilled that in me from the very beginning. I remember the first ultrasound I wanted to buy, and he said, "You don't know that horse has got a bowed tendon. You got to go back to school." And then we both laughed about it and said, "Well, yeah, but that tendon can be swollen and there's no damage. It's just acute inflammation, or there can be damage, and we'll know how much time to give it off, and we'll know along that time how it's healing, and when it's healed completely, and how to move forward with the training process." So, those were things that he threw at me before all this fancy diagnostics were available.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's what makes it.
Good. Final question here, Vince. The title of the podcast is Harnessing Your Wealth. So we're going to ask, how have you been able to harness your wealth over the years?
You tell me, and you better be good.
Okay. I thought you might throw that back at us.
You knew that.
Yeah.
And that was another thing. I remember when I graduated, my dad's best friend was an MD and a very successful surgeon at St. Joseph's in Orange County. And he said, talk with Dr. Heps and see what he suggests. And my father bought a lot of real estate and was successful at his job and in investing in real estate. And this Dr. Hepp said, you need to find yourself an investment advisor. And I thought, I know a guy. He's not very smart. He was a jockey and fell off a lot, but
I never fell off. It didn't just fall off. Okay, there are certain things that happen in a race, and you go off.
Okay, all right.
It was the horse's fault.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when I'd met you at the track several times, even at Los Alamitos, and you were discussing with me, and it's funny because I have this these discussions with these young veterinarians now at the racetrack, I say, look, pay off your student loans, but if your percentage on your student loans are, less than 5%, use half of that money and invest it, because you're going to make more on your investments. And I've given your number out to 1 million people. And I obviously, in your firm and your sibling, or not siblings, but your partners in your firm, I have faith in them. I joke around and I give you guys a lot of flack, but obviously I wouldn't be where I am today without you guys. And I appreciate that deeply. And I hate to pull all my money out of there, but you better do a good job this year too.
Thanks, Vince.
It's important to people, because you start making a good living and you think, oh, well, I'm going to buy a house, which is, you got to do that. That's the first investment you make. But you've got to think, I'm not going to be able to do this forever. And the SEP IRAs that you would increase every year. The 531s that you had me start when Carol was pregnant with Aubrey. She's a junior in college, and I haven't had to take a penny out of my pocket to pay for her college, and she's going to go on to do, postgraduate work, and that's all going to be taken care of because of the steps you made me take, or us, my wife and I, take to invest in her future. And people, you don't learn about that kind of stuff in school. In fact, I think schools are getting less and less educating as far as business wise goes. And so where do you find that information out? That's something you guys are probably thinking too. How do we get this information out to people that, sure, if you make $1 a day, and you're going to spend 75 cents, 25 cents has got to go someplace for your future.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thanks for the comments, Vince. We appreciate it. I mean, I've worked with your family for a long time and got to know each and every one of them. And I know it helped things transition after your father died and your mother died. And so, there's a complicated concepts, not only investing and preparing for your future, but transitioning wealth from one generation to the next. And there's a lot of tricky things that go into that. And, all of it requires some expertise. And I've tried to learn along the way. I worked with a lot of high net worth people, is similar sounding to what you've done in your career, work with a lot of people who have money and wealth, and they trust you to do the right job. And I've been fortunate every day to work with people like you and your family and others throughout the country. And most of them, have wealth and they love an industry like horse racing. And that's why I like the people involved in the industry. They're just good, down to earth people. And we have a good rapport, good conversations, have some things in common. So appreciate what you've done, and you've been a longstanding client. Heck, I guess you guys are some of my earliest clients. If you look back in those days,
I think I was one of the first 5 or 10 of your clients, and we've been through a lot, and appreciate you guys tremendously.
Well, and I will say, I worked at a lot of different brokerage firms. It's more Payne Weber, Smith Barney, Vince's, of course, made the moves every time he's followed me around, and I've appreciated that. He used to send notes in with his checks for contribution into his retirement plan. And so you don't know the amount of flack I had to take from all your funny little wisecracks, Vince. They
were educational.
They were very educational. When you have the operational staff at a firm, a very large firm with about 100 people, and they come back to your office and they're all giggling and snickering and saying, "What's up?" And what would you like us to do with this check from a Dr. Vince Baker? I said, "Well, just put it in his account. What do you want?" Okay, what do you want us to do about this note that he left? Because it says it's for your penile enlargement surgery. So still wisecrack like that I had to put up with, dealing with for 30 years, Vince, 25 years,
at least 30. Yeah. Well, and look, it's made you a better person.
Oh, and I said, "Hey, I don't want that check. I don't need that check." Send it back to Vince. Obviously, he's having some own personal problems of his own. But anyhow, I just wanted to share some stories, and we've had a lot of good times. And if our listeners, if you ever get out to California and want to go see the racetrack, that'd be a great place to visit. You go to the backside, check out what's going on. There's so much work behind the scenes that no one really knows about.
No, it's impressive the way industry like horse racing, how it moves from day to day. It's we take it for granted because you and I have been around it our whole lives, but it's you stop and look and think, the hundreds and hundreds of people involved in it, anywhere from people growing the feed out in the field, the alfalfa or the timothy or the straw or the oats or the grain, to people making the saddles, making, the jockey's equipment, to the veterinary supplies and the advanced
shavings and the bedding and all of the supplements. And there's so much going on. So it's a wonderful industry. I really enjoyed being a part of it. And I want to thank you, Vince, for sharing all your thoughts and wisdom here, and appreciate what you've said today. I want to also tell our listeners that coming up on our next podcast, we are going to have a man of a lot of different hats joining us, who's been involved in, so many things, from auctioneering to running the country's largest horse auction company to the insurance industry and many other hats that he's worn throughout his career. So you'll want to stay tuned for that. His name is Jeff Tebow. We're going to have him on next. So until next time, appreciate everyone listening. Drop us an email or visit our website if you want to learn more about what's going on. You can go to petersonws.com for the website, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to Harnessing Your Wealth with Billy Peterson. Before we declare the race official, please click the follow button so you can be notified when new episodes become available. For more information about today's show, please check out the show notes. Visit our website at www.petersonws.com or give us a call at 801-475-4002. Once again, thank you for listening. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Peterson Wealth Services. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.